Good morning, St. Joseph students. It is December and time for our new virtue word for the month of December. And you can see behind me that this month we have the word generosity. So let's take a look and see what that means for us. We have the definition for generosity as being giving without counting the cost. Generosity calls us to give. Well, what are we asked to give? Let's look. We're asked to give our time. We're asked to give our attention. Maybe there's someone in your classroom who needs a friend, and you're called to be generous with your attention that you give them so that they feel like they have a friend. Money, which we've talked about last month with the word stewardship. So we're called to give money to those that need it. And things. We might need to be generous with our things, sharing our things, right? So without counting the cost. In other words, not being worried about what it means for us, just being worried about the fact that someone needs it, and so therefore we give it. Generosity is to be like God. In fact, God was so generous that he gave us his son. Can you imagine that? He gave us his son, and his son died on the cross for us. Jesus showed us the ultimate generosity. He was willing to die for us. Now, as we talk every month, you're not being asked to die for anybody right now, or probably ever. Instead, let's look at what does generosity mean to us then. If Jesus can die on the cross for us, what can we do that's generous? Well, it could be that you're going to look out for someone, maybe someone at home. Maybe you have a little brother or sister and you need to be helpful to them. You need to maybe do a little bit of babysitting for them, or you need to help them do their chores or help them do their homework. At home, you might be generous to your parents and giving of your time to them, making sure you get your chores done. All of those things at home. You might be generous in the classroom with a classmate. Maybe needs your help doing something. Maybe needs your help on some homework. Your teacher needs you to be generous. How are you giving to your teacher without worrying about what you're going to get in return? Are you giving your teacher the best of you? That would be generous. On the playground, sometimes there might be a student in the school who isn't quite as good at the football game that you're playing. So are you being generous and giving that person some tips on how to be better? That would be a generous thing to do. Do you see somebody playing by themselves? Are you going over and asking them to be included in your game? That would be generous. So lots of places that you can give of your time and your attention. In the classroom, you might be asked to give of your things. Do you need to share something? Does somebody in your classroom need a pencil? Do they need a piece of notebook paper? Do they need to share your crayons? All of those things would be generous in the classroom. The most important thing, though, is that if you're going to actually be generous, it means that you expect nothing in return. Nothing. You don't expect a positive virtue mark. You don't expect to get to come and draw out of my basket. You don't expect the teacher to say good job every time you do something. It just means you do it because it's the right thing to do, because you're generous. Now, sometimes those other good things happen. Sometimes someone notices and they might give you a positive virtue mark, or they might let you draw out of a prize basket. But you're not expecting that to happen. You're not doing it because it might happen. You're just doing it because it's the right thing to do. And possibly the hardest thing about truly being generous is that you have to be able to open your heart and give to everyone. And that might mean someone who doesn't deserve it, right? So you might have a student in your classroom who you think always acts mean at recess, always cheats at the game. And and then wants to borrow a pencil, and you're like, I don't want to give him a pencil because he cheated at recess. That's not what we're called to do. We're called to be generous anyway, even to people who you think might not deserve it, because that's their problem. But you are trying to be virtuous, so you're going to give anyway. It might be that we're called to give to someone that we don't particularly like. Everyone in the building isn't best friends with each other, and that's okay, but we still are kind and virtuous towards that person. So in the classroom, if someone needs to borrow a pair of scissors, do you only be generous and give your scissors if it's your best friend, or do you be generous and give your scissors to anybody that needs them? That would be generous. And it might even be that we don't know the person. It might be a stranger needs something. Are you willing to give to a stranger? So Many of you were very generous and brought canned goods when we did our food drive for the food bank. And those kinds of things are actually kind of easy for us to do because we just go home and find some cans in our pantry and bring them to school. So that kind of generosity is easy. The hard, difficult kind of generosity is the kind that really requires us to do these things, to give to someone who doesn't deserve it, to give to someone we don't particularly care for, to give to a stranger. So let's dig deep this month and really think about how we can be generous in those ways. The last thing I want to point out is that to be truly generous and godlike, you have to give cheerfully. So if you're whining and complaining that you have to share or help someone in the classroom, then that's not generosity, because you have to give cheerfully, happily. In fact, if you look up 2 Corinthians 9, verses 6 and 7, you're going to find out that God loves a cheerful giver. In fact, this is your homework assignment when we're done, or your classroom assignment is for every classroom to look up this verse, 2 Corinthians 9, 6 and 7, and read about that and see what it means to be a cheerful giver, because that is what God calls us to do. Okay. Depending on how old you are this month, we have 3 saints you're going to talk about: Saint Mary Magdalene, Saint Maximilian Kolbe, Saint Nicholas. All 3 are 3 of my favorite saints. So let's talk just a minute about Saint Mary Magdalene. She's such an interesting character in the Bible because we learn that many people saw her as a sinner. And in fact, Jesus gets demons out of her, about 7 demons out of her. So people often associate her with being a sinner. But then she is so generous and such a cheerful giver that she is also the character in the Bible who anoints Jesus's feet with her hair. At least people give her credit for that. It doesn't specifically say in the Bible that it's the same Mary, but that is what most people assume that it is her. They think that she washes his feet with her tears. And in fact, she becomes one of the closest followers of Jesus, to the point that she's one of the few people that was with Jesus when he died on the cross. And then she's often shown in pictures with a bottle of perfume because she's given credit for washing his body after he was taken down from the cross and put in the tomb. So what an ultimate, and she did all of that with great cost. It would have been very dangerous for her to do that during that time because Jesus was considered a criminal. So she did all of that without worrying about the cost to her own personal self. So she's a great example of generosity. And the other 2 that you're going to read about are also. So again, this month we're going to concentrate on being generous. We're going to concentrate on giving without worrying about what we're going to get in return and worrying about what it costs to us. We're going to give first out of our abundance and not giving out of what's left over. So think about this through the month and have a great day.